Hello, I'm Judy Gaya, your host of this podcast. I'm currently on a study tour in Jalingo, Taraba State. Great scenery, but poor internet. What this means is that the quality of today's episode is not great, and we do apologize. However, we felt that the topics under discussion were important, and so we are publishing this with some editing to remove some of the bits. I apologize again, and happy listening. Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast brought to you by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Judy Gaya, and every Saturday we look at stories shaping our continent. First, we turn to our attention to Sudan's forgotten conflict. A recent shift in the military situation has intensified the power struggle between the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF. We'll unpack how this conflict has stymied peace talks and explore the complex web of international interests involved. Next, we examine a troubling report from Nigeria's southeast geopolitical zone, where the Eastern Security Network is said to have launched an attack on soldiers. We'll discuss who the ESN is and their ideological splits within the group. How does this internal conflict escalate the already volatile situation? Lastly, we shift our attention to Nigeria's economy. The country's Senate has recently halted the public hearing on the proposed amendments to the CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria Act. We'll explore the key concerns raised by the public and experts, including a contentious proposal to create a coordinating committee for monetary and fiscal policies. Joining me for in-depth analysis and expert insights on this critical stories is Confident Makari, Senior Security Analyst at SBM Intelligence. Welcome, Confident.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for having me again.
Okay, so Confident, let's delve right into Sudan's issue, where a power tussle and competing interests seem to be making peace elusive. So a recent report mentions a shift in the military situation in Sudan. Can you explain the current power tussle? Can you explain the current power tussle between the SAF and the RSF and how it has impacted the possibility of peace talk?
So Sudan currently experiences one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Statistically, nearly 18 million people, which is 1 in 3 Sudanese, they already face high levels of acute food insecurity, and 5 million are dealing with emergency levels of hunger. The conflict has displaced 8.2 million people. For the World Food Program part, it has activated emergency response to avert famine in some of the places where Sudanese people have been forced to seek refuge, especially Sudan. The camps in those places are less than palatable. There's not much going on, and the problem is that Chad also has this humanitarian crisis on its hand. So since much of the world is focused on the crisis in Gaza, there's not much aid coming into the country, and given the fact that both sides have not let up on the fighting, it's quite difficult to see how much humanitarian aid the victims can get.
Okay. Thank you for enlightening us on the conflict in Sudan. But now we move to the Nigerian, now we move over to the issue concerning separatists in the southeastern geopolitical zone of Nigeria. So the Eastern Security Network, according to a report, carried out a recent attack on soldiers. Harry, can you explain who the ESN is and the competing ideologies within the group?
All right, so the ESN was created in late 2020 by Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, as is known. Nnamdi Kanu is the leader of the indigenous peoples of Biafra. The indigenous peoples of Biafra are seeking the breakaway of eastern Nigeria or southeastern Nigeria from the Nigerian Federation. So he created the ESN in response to the what he perceives as the failure of the governors in the southeast region, failure in stepping up to the challenges of insecurity, especially posed by Fulani headsmen in the area. Some of the events leading up to that was that the southwest governors banded together under the aegis of the Western Security Network, also known as Dawn Commission, to create Operation Amotekun, which is a regional security outfit, and several calls for the Southeast to do the same thing proved abortive. So Kanu took it upon himself. As of then, the Fulani herdsmen were marauding farmlands in the region. They were displacing people, they were killing people. And so he felt he needed his organization needed to step in. So ESN was created as a military wing of the indigenous peoples of Biafra, which, according to Kanu, is solely created to fight the menace of the Fulani headsmen during the trade, and the mostly resided in the forest areas. But at the moment, there is a split. There seems to be a split between the more militant faction, which is led by Simon Ekpa, a lawyer that a lawyer that resides in Finland, and the more powerful faction, which is the IPOB faction, which more people know as the original IPOB. And because of this split, mostly primarily has to do two things. First, the approach to the release of Nnamdi Kanu from detention, from which he has been in detention since 2022, I think August 2022, if I'm not mistaken. He was extraordinarily renditioned from Kenya and has been in detention ever since. For IPOB, led by Emma Powerful, which of course used to be the spokesperson, I think he's still the spokesperson of the group. They prefer dialogue, they prefer civil dialogue with the government, applying pressure on the government through civil means to get him released. But for the Simon Ekpa faction, they prefer acts such as sit at home, compliance of sit at home procedures, especially on Mondays, and forcing every other person into quarantine. Part where they also differ is their approach to the secession of the region. So IPOB's goal back then generally was to combine both violence and non-violence as a means, but for the ESN right now, violence is a primary means of forcing the government's hand. The a more powerful faction have sought to distance the main IPOB group from ESN, but that hasn't appeared to work, especially in general consciousness that IPOB is ESN and ESN is IPOB.
Okay. You did mention that the ESN was created to fight against the menace of Fulani attacks in the Southeast geopolitical zone. Do Fulani still carry out attacks in the Southeast?
Yeah, yes, they do. Just as 2 weeks ago, there was attack in Nimbo community in Uzo Uwani local government area of Enugu State. So it has been or some of the um, so what about Nimbo is 2016 attacking planning yet crisis that much commitment by the Nigerian security forces or the government resolving. So as a result, there's been lots of displacement from those areas. And not much is going on economically in those areas. There's been a lot of displacement. But the Fulani herdsmen seem to have been taking over the areas where they took people from.
Okay. So um, what uh, there seems to be a constant conflicting a sense of a sort of conflict between the ESN and the Nigerian army. Now, are there any alternative strategies that Nigerian government and Nigerian army can deploy to better their relationship with the local population to win hearts and minds, because there seems to be a hostility between the people of the southeastern geopolitical zone and the army. So, are there any alternative means rather than the kinetic means to solving the issues there?
In the first place, the Nigerian government and its military needs to stop looking at the Southeast as a conquered territory. Um, IPOBs, one of what drove IPOB into armed struggle was the feeling of marginalization. That has not largely been addressed, although a lot of the blame rests squarely on the political leaders, especially the elected leaders of the region. The federal government has not really treated the Southeast as one of the parts of the federation. And secondly, the military also needs to improve its civil military relation. And one of the key ways it needs to do that is the abandonment of collective or punitive punishment, collective punishment whenever something goes wrong for military armed forces personnel. That week's killing has elicited a lot of reaction, especially following the army's decision to carry whoever it sees in as a suspect over the killing of its personnel. This is something that the police used to do. We expect the army to do better, but clearly they haven't. So this particular act of punitive or collective punishment is serving to alienate the public, and it's not going to really help them in the positions in an area that is too urban to carry out counterinsurgency operations successfully.
Okay. Some experts have linked such collective punishment measures by the military to the history or the history of the creation of the military, that is from the colonial era, where the military or the police were created more to protect those in government than to protect the citizens. So, do you also lean into this school of thought?
That was, I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Okay. That it is residue from the colonial masters, or the way the military and the police were created, that they had hitherto been created to protect those in government rather than the citizens.
Yeah, so the attributes or the outlook of the Nigerian security forces largely rest on three layers, which the first is regime security, the second is elite security, and then the third national security. But given how economically constrained Nigeria is, the overwhelming focus is now on regime security. So, of course, it's a holdover of colonialism that the Nigerian state is here to remove itself from.
Okay, so now we move to the Nigerian Senate, where recently they halted an attempt to amend the CBN Act for further consultation. Confidence, can you tell us what the key concerns are with the CBN Act as is that requires amendment?
All right. So what the Senate is trying to do is to amend the CBN Act to make it more responsible. But the question is, responsible to who? The outlook seems responsible to the political class, especially the presidency. What the senators think they're trying to do is to make it more responsible in the sense that it does not have free reign to act so more independently as to put the country under strain. I'm going to read out some of the provisions of the bill, especially the key aspects. So, in the first place, the bill wants to include in its amendment the establishment of a 7-member coordinating committee for monetary and fiscal policies, which is to be chaired by the Minister of Finance. Secondly, the tenure of the CBN governor and the deputy governors will be set at a single non-renewal term of 6 years for the governor and the deputy governors. And furthermore, the appointment of a minimum of one career staff of the bank in the community of governors, another appointment, and the appointment of at least one female among them, that's among the external directors. The bill will also seek to establish the position of the which will report directly to the board and may occasionally be summoned to appear before the relevant committee of the National Assembly, which is the Banking Committee. Second, and furthermore, which of course you should pay attention to this, the bill seeks to limit to temporary advances to the federal government, and finally the issuance of new legal tender to replace existing ones. Although there are other key aspects, but the last two are prominent because of, I think, what drives them to include this is part of what the CBN governor in the previous term did. This should go without saying, but given the fact that they needed to include it in the bill tells you all that you need to know. The CBN, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007 says that the CBN cannot loan the government more than 5% of its previous year's revenue. In essence, if the federal government earns 100 naira the previous year, the maximum amount it can borrow from the CBN is 5 naira. But during the Buhari era, the CBN went on a printing spree, which it later thought, under Governor Emefiele, it later thought that the circulation of too much naira in the economy was badly hurting it and leading to inflation. Then it realized, it tried to reverse it by printing new naira notes, changing the legal tender and the likes, which of course elicited a lot of problem. And one of the reasons why the CBN could do that was because the CBN governor got political backing from the president. And despite the senators who are looking to amend this bill, failing to take into account that the president, as of then, which was Buhari, more than once publicly stated that he asked the CBN governor to do this. I don't think from the foregoing that however this new bill is designed, absolves, if he doesn't also call for punishment for the president in trying to interfere with the institutional independence of the central bank, I don't think it's really going to make any difference this time around.
Okay, so one of the proposals is for a coordinating committee for monetary and fiscal policies. Can you explain the purpose of this committee and how it might differ from the existing Monetary Policy Committee of the CBN?
The current Monetary Policy Committee is the one that sets the monetary policy rates, also sets the rate at which money is borrowed. What the proposed committee will be doing is, in the first place, it will be under the chairmanship of the Minister of Finance. So this particular committee that they're proposing will set interest rates for the CBN's temporary advances to the federal government. And largely what this implies is that to subject monetary policy to fiscal dominance instead of working hand in hand or working on an equal footing. And this will result in a conflict of interest and subject monetary policy decisions to factors other than economic data. So this will be subject to political manipulation since the chairman of the committee, which is the Minister of Finance, answers to the president who appointed him. It automatically means that the president will not have enough economic and political latitude to tinker with the CBN's decisions, especially when it comes to monetary policy rates.
Okay. So, is it, going by your last statement, is it safe to say that the IMF's concerns about the amendment weakening the CBN's autonomy is well placed?
Yes, it is. It is an independent central bank acts as an economic arbiter between the economy and the federal government, especially as it is expected to stay above the political fray. Given the outward aspect and outlook of the bill might seem well intentioned, but there is a lot of underwriting and undercurrents of political interference if one even takes one eye to look at it. And there's no gainsaying the fact that this is going to affect investors' confidence, because putting the CBN, whether directly or indirectly, under the control of whatever government that is in power is going to severely weaken its ability to carry out its functions. And one of the key things is that economic data is supposed to lead what the CBN does, especially when it comes to the setting of interest basis, interest rates, and the associated factors of its functions. But doing so will now be that the federal government or the presidency will not be the one to dictate at what rate the CBN will be lending its money, and it's going to spook investors. It's already spoken investors for the IMF to speak out. It's already spoken investors, and this is going to be bad in several proportions, in ways that they do not really, especially people who are pushing this thing in ways that they do not really foresee.
All right. Thank you, Confidence, for joining us in today's episode and enlightening us on issues affecting Nigeria and the African continent. And to our listeners, okay, thank you. And to our listeners, we want to apologize for the technical glitches experienced during the recording. And you can reach us on our website at www.sbmintelligence.com. And remember to connect with us on social media. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.